All right, what's up, Dragon Brood? Today we're going to be taking a look at the top commander cards from Brothers War. Because I think there's a lot of things, there's a lot of legends, there's a lot of crazy new abilities, and people are probably wondering, what should I be looking for? What should I be targeting? How can cards be used? Which ones are better? Well, let's talk about it. These are my picks for the top cards for Commander from Brothers War. All right, we're going to start at the top here with Liberator, Urza's Battlethopter. It's a 3 colorless 1/2 legendary artifact creature Thopter. It has flash, it has flying. You can cast colorless spells and artifact spells as though they had flash. And then whenever you cast another spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast that spell is greater than Liberator Urza's Battlethopter's power, you put a +1/+1 counter on Liberator. And the interesting thing here is whenever you cast a spell, it doesn't say when you cast an artifact spell, it doesn't whatever, just whenever you cast any spell, if the amount of mana you spent is bigger than the power on this, you get to grow it. Now, why do I think this is so good for Commander? First off, if you like playing Thopters, this is a legendary Thopter, right? It's the first time we've had one of these. So this is actually really cool if you're a fan of Thopters. It has flash, it has flying. So it's just a good all-around creature. It's going to be hard to kill, it gets to grow every turn, and it gives all your other colorless spells and artifact spells flash. That's really big. We have other cards that have done that, like the Orrery, and I think there was a Mirror that did that as well. So there's a few different cards that have allowed that to happen. So those are always popular. So I assume this is also going to be popular. Even if you don't play this for the sake of it being a Thopter or even being your commander, just that ability gives you a cheap way to add this to your deck. And if it's the ability you already like, because you like those other cards that do it, you can just add this to your 99 and just have one more way to have that option. So yeah, this card's actually really good, and you can get your hands on this pretty cheaply right now for just a couple of dollars. So yeah, really good value, unique, like a lot of things about this. I think this is definitely one that you can play in Commander. All right, next up we have one with the Multiverse. It's a 6 colorless blue enchantment. You can look at the top card of your library at any time. You can play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. Once during each turn, you may cast a spell from your library, from your hand, or the top of your library without paying its mana cost. So this is actually pretty cool because your spells now are free, at least one free one per turn. And it doesn't matter if it's in your hand or if it's on top of your library. So that's actually really big. And you always get to know what's on top of your library, so that's a bonus. And you can play lands and spells from the top of your library. So this card's doing a lot of different things that are all very good. And it's a type of card that like you can ramp into that just gives you more action constantly. Becomes a card that like you're probably going to become the arch enemy and people are going to be trying to kill you when you have this, but totally worth it, right? You get to be the most powerful person doing the most powerful things. This is actually really damn neat. Now, how are you going to get it into play? That's a whole different discussion. However, this card is already on ticking up a little bit, anywhere between, $7 to $10 depending on where you're picking it up at. So, it's already kind of catching on with people, and I think a lot of people are targeting this for things like Commander, so not really a surprise, but this card's all around really good. All right, next up is Painful Quandary. It's a 5 mana enchantment. Whenever your opponent casts a spell, that player loses 5 life unless they discard a card. Now, this is kind of cheating a little bit because it's a reprint, and we already know the other one's good, so yeah, this one's still going to be good too. The reason I bring it up, though, is it's one of those cards that a lot of people didn't start playing Magic, much less Commander, until, the pandemic. Well, this card hasn't really been reprinted for quite a while. The other one, I believe, is from Scars of Mirrodin. So, yeah, a lot of people don't even know this card exists, and it's really good. And what I like about it is it's whenever an opponent casts, so it works against all your opponents. So again, this is one of those things that's going to bring attention to you, but it's going to put the opponents really in a bind because they're going to have to be discarding cards every time they play something or they lose 5 life. Now, admittedly, in Commander, we get more than 20 life, so it hurts less, but it's still a nuisance and nobody likes taking a 5 life hit. But while we're on the subject of reprints, this one is one as well on Fauna Shaman. It's a 2 mana 2/2 elf shaman. You can pay 1 and tap it to discard a card, search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. This card's really good. I've played it for years in various versions of Green. Played it in Elves, played it in Rith. Like, this card just does so much. When you're looking for one of your creatures that enters a battlefield with some ability, you can go find that. When you're trying to give maybe the thing that gives your stuff haste and get a big attack in to finish, you can go find that. The card is just very versatile. Like, not a lot to complain about here. Old versions had already crept up to about $10. You can pick up the new ones for about $5. And I think that's totally fair and reasonable here. This is one, if you don't have one, you should probably pick up one. Maybe even pick up a couple if you have multiple green decks. This card is very good, and you should definitely be playing it in Commander. All right, next up we have Portal 2 Forexia, which, by the way, not to be confused with Phyrexian Portal, which is from way back when. So it's kind of a weird that we named it this way, but we have Portal 2 Phyrexia, which is a 9 mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you put target creature card from a graveyard on the battlefield under your control. It's a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. Now, the thing I'll say about this is in some ways a little bit reminiscent of Shieldred, right? The old one, where your opponents had to sacrifice stuff, and you were getting creatures back, and it was super annoying, right? This is kind of like that, but it costs way more. However, it's all colorless mana, which means this can go into a lot of different decks. And I think because of that alone, this is going to keep the price of this, I won't say crazy high, but at least stable. So I wouldn't be shocked if you're going to end up having to pay $15 to $18 for this in a few months, because I can see it going into a lot of different builds. It also kind of holds your opponents off a little bit. It kills off 3 things from each opponent. And then just every upkeep, you're getting the best thing out of all the graveyards, because it's not even your graveyard, it's just a graveyard. So this card's very, very good, and I would not be surprised if we start seeing this at quite a few Commander tables. Next up, we've got Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia, 2 colorless and a green for a 2/3 Elf Druid Scout, legendary creature. Tap, add 2 mana of any combination of colors. Spend it only to cast creature spells or activate creature abilities. Whenever you cast a creature spell with power 5 or greater, put a +1/+1 counter on Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia, and untap it. Now, one of the things about this card that's really neat is if you're playing any type of battle cruiser type magic, as we'll call it, for Commander, you're going to be playing a lot of big spells, or maybe even dragons, or something of that nature. This is going to not only get you mana, but it's going to untap, get bigger, and give you more mana. This card's very good, and it's only 1 green in the cost, so 3 mana is very easy for people to have. This is a good ramp spell. It can be a sizable body. I'm not sure what there is to dislike about this. The only weird thing is it only kind of sort of goes in elf decks because, well, elves don't have that many real big expensive things. So unless you're just using this to, like, I don't know, trigger off of a Crater Hoof or something that you may be playing, it probably doesn't go in that particular deck, which is a little unfortunate with it being a new elf. But honestly, it goes into a ton of other things. This card is just very, very good. So yeah, this is another one you can pick up for probably $2 or $3 right now, so an easy addition to a lot of different Commander builds. This one probably comes as no surprise on the list, but Geeks, Yawg, Mothbrater. It's a 3 mana 3/3 Phyrexian Praetor. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may pay 1 life. If they do, they draw a card. You can pay 7, discard X cards, exile the top cards of target opponent's library, and you may cast spells from among those without paying their cost. This is just an all-around good card for Commander. I mean, it encourages your opponents to attack each other and not you because they have an opportunity to get extra cards. And then if you know somebody's deck has cool big spells that you'd like to get access to, those cards you've collected from attacking people, you can now just discard them, look at the top 3 or 4 things from their library, and see if you get some cool big stuff for free. This is just a really cool card, and I don't expect this to be super cheap anytime soon. We're already seeing it in the $15+ range. I think it's probably going to hang around there for a little bit because it's also going to have uses in Standard, possibly in Pioneer, but it's definitely going to get played in a few different formats. So if you get one and you get lucky, great. Otherwise, you might have to shell out a little bit for this one, but I think it could be worth it. All right, this I think is the last reprint that made the list, but this one's no surprise either. Diabolic Intent. 2 colorless, sacrifice a creature. Whenever you cast it, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, and shuffle. Like, we already know, especially competitive Commander players really like tutors. This lets you go get anything you need in a pinch. Sacrificing a creature is not a difficult thing to do. The decks that want to play this will almost always have something they can sacrifice. And honestly, you can tell from the price, the oldest ones, I believe, from Planeshift were like $30-ish. And then there was some reprints somewhere along the way, like Battle Bond, that I believe are like $20 to $25. So the new ones being in the $10 to $12 range sounds about right. I think that's probably where it's going to sit for a little bit. You could see the price come down to maybe around like $8 or $9, but you're not going to go wrong picking these up right now. If you want another tutor that's not going to be so budget breaking, I guess, that's actually really good, this is one. It's almost a no restrictions tutor, really. This card's just a no-brainer. I expect we're going to see a lot of these, especially now that they can be acquired for a reasonable price or just even opened out of a booster pack. Alright, this is probably the card I'm going to hate the most from this list to play against, but Hurkyl's Final Meditation. It's a 7 mana instant. As long as it's not your turn, the spell costs 3 more to cast, so if you do it on somebody else's turn, you have to spend 10. Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hand, and then you end the turn. This one's tough, right? We already don't like seeing stuff like Cyclonic Rift. That's already a problem. We see lots of complaints about that card. I expect this is going to fall in that same thing. Though, this is a lot of mana to do it on somebody else's turn. It's already 7, 4 colorless and 3 blue. And then as long as it's not your turn, it costs 3 more to cast, right? So, you might need up to 10 mana to really make this thing happen. But it can be played defensively as well, if you need to on your turn for some reason, so that's a thing. But most of the time, you're going to play it on somebody else's turn. And you're going to be the first one to get to reset and get things back out. I hate to say it, but I expect we're going to see a fair amount of this card. The good news is, it is so prohibitively expensive, we're not going to see an insane amount of them, because I think there are some decks that just aren't going to want to pay this type of cost. But for the ones that do, or they're ramping up and doing all that other stuff, this could be really annoying. Especially if it finds a way to keep coming back out of the graveyard, because this card does not exile itself. Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hand, end the turn. That's it, right? So, could be one of those things that if somebody builds a recursive loop with this or whatever, they're going to be the most hated person at the table. Because I hate seeing this happen and people don't just get to the end game state, but we'll see what happens. I don't know. I think this card is pretty good for a commander though, and I am not going to have fun playing against it. And this one here should come as no surprise. Myrel, Shield of Argive, 4 mana, 3/4 human soldier. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. Whenever Myrel, Shield of Argive attacks, create X/1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of soldiers you control. I don't even think you need a ton of soldiers to really make this good, and I think that's the issue, right? Even if you just have a few soldiers, it's going to have a lot of value. But even just having this sit out there and say, okay, when it's your turn, your opponents can't kill things, they can't activate things, they can't counter stuff. Like, this is going to be good on its own, right? This is even better than something like Defense Grid, where they can't just counter things. Like, this also keeps them from activating things. So you can kind of take your turns with impunity to know that, like, there's not going to be anything stopping you. That's kind of a nice convenience. And with only 1 white mana in the casting cost, it actually makes it very friendly to a lot of different deck types. And it happens to be a human in addition to being a soldier, so there's going to be some theme decks that people are playing that. The downside of this card is right now it's clocking in at like $20. I don't know if that's a real price or not. I feel like in my insides that this is closer to like a $12 to $15 card. But we've seen other crazy things happen, and maybe $20, $25 is real, and that's just what we're going to have to pay for these. But yeah, this card, very good, and I expect we're going to see quite a lot of it, maybe even in Standard. Now, what I'd like to know is, are there cards that I missed? Are there cards that you've been targeting to build into your, or buy and put into your builds in Commander? Because I'm sure there's other neat things that I just probably wasn't paying attention to. Maybe I overlooked. Maybe you just value them more than me, or do you think my picks are crazy? Let me know down below. But that's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.